So I'm sitting here with Brian Silvernale, and why don't you introduce yourself, tell what you do, what you're hoping to do, and let's kind of take it from there.
Sure. Well, good afternoon. My name is Brian Silvernale. I am a lieutenant and a bureau commander for the Yavapai County Sheriff's Office. I have spent my 20-year career at the Sheriff's Office in our detention division. So I've done just about every job that we have to do at our jail. And I know that this jail is kind of a hot button topic in this campaign cycle, and I know that for a couple reasons. Number one, I keep up on local politics, but number two, I'm running for political office in our county right now. I'm running for the Board of Supervisors for the Yavapai County government, and specifically in District 5, which is mostly Prescott Valley and Diamond Valley and Yavapai Hills and the ranch and out towards Walker and Groom Creek. That's the area where I live. I've been in the area a long time, most of my life, 39 years, and I'm 40 years old, so almost all my life. I have been a public servant, I think, all of my life. It started from what was instilled in me by my parents and my grandparents. My family's been in Prescott since, I think, 1968. Been involved in business and philanthropic work here in Yavapai County for a long time. So both in the private and public sector, I've been giving back to our community. Even as a young churchgoer at First Baptist Church, I was parking cars in the parking lots down there downtown Prescott when we had all kinds of events in the downtown square area. So that's a little bit about me, and like Lynn said, I work in the jail, and I think that kind of the goal here is to communicate some of what goes on in our jail. So,
And that's the jail in Camp Verde.
Correct. So technically there's two facilities in Yavapai County for jail facilities. Our main jail is in Camp Verde, and that's the only one that is technically open. The one that's in Prescott was built in 1981, I believe, and it was closed in 2009. It was closed for several different reasons. And currently it's used as an intake and temporary holding facility for new bookings and court holding for people that have to come over from Camp Verde and go to court. In Yavapai County, about 67% of cases that are charged in Yavapai County come from the western slopes of Mingus Mountain. So this, and really our populace over here is Chino and Prescott Valley and Prescott and Dewey. So the majority of crime that's being committed in Yavapai County is being committed in this Quad City area. So it's pretty inefficient to have your main facility 45 miles away and have to continue to bus back and forth for court proceedings and all that kind of stuff. And my office technically in Camp Verde. My role at the Sheriff's Office leads me all over the state with other jurisdictions and with other entities in our county. We work very closely with all of the different departments and department heads of the county to be able to effectively manage our jail population.
So if somebody were to be booked in as an inmate, what can they expect as kind of their daily routine?
So, well, from time of booking, you get picked up and it's determined that you're coming to jail. You get escorted into the jail in handcuffs, you get searched, your paperwork is processed, and you go through all the identification processes that we do as a law enforcement entity. We make sure that we have the person that is being booked in and that we've done the identification process. So fingerprints and iris scanning and photographs of the face and the side profile and all the different tattoos or identifiable markings that we can make sure that we're identifying the people that we're processing into the criminal justice system. We do a classification screening and multiple other screenings right there at intake to try to identify where's this person going to best be housed within our facility while they're with us. What are some of the potential underlying causes of the criminalistic behavior that is being identified, and how can we best address some of those underlying causes of that criminalistic behavior? Is there something different that we can do? And we do that right there when they come in the doors. From there, they're changed out. They go to their housing location, and every single inmate in the state of Arizona, in fact, I'm pretty sure in the country, has to be seen by a judge within 24 hours of their arrest time. So one of the first things that you do after you're housed is you end up going and seeing the judge. And we have courts going all day long. One of the things that I hear in this campaign cycle is how we should be doing our court appearances telephonically or over a video monitor. We do. The majority of our inmate appearances in court are via a video monitor. So that initial appearance happens within that 24-hour time period, and that inmate has the opportunity to, number one, hear what they're charged with, even though they've already been read their Miranda rights and been told what they're charged with by the arresting officer. But the judge informs them what their charges are, and the judge hears them out on any kind of release information that they may need, so the judge can make a determination on release. And then the judge will set future court dates or make determinations on probable cause and those types of things right there at the initial appearance, and then set release conditions for that inmate. And the inmate then has release conditions that they now move forward with. In that initial, sorry, go ahead.
Those release conditions, is that like their bail, or if they're going to get out on their own recognizance or something along those lines?
Sure, absolutely, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So the judge is making the determination whether they're letting the inmate out, and there's a various array of how an inmate can get out of jail, whether it's a bond, and whether that bond is a cash or secured appearance bond. And whether they're going to be released to potentially a pretrial services program, which we have. It's kind of a diversionary effort to involve probation to be able to supervise somebody while they're going through their case. Whether they're just going to be let out on their own recognizance, meaning that the judge says, I'm trusting you to come back to court to deal with your case. The judge could make determinations at the initial appearance that says, you know what, the officer was wrong. The officer didn't have any probable cause to arrest you, and I'm releasing you, and we're going to throw this case out or give it back to the law enforcement entity to file in a different manner. But so there's an array of what the judge can do at that initial appearance. One of the things that we try to do at the sheriff's office, that identification of what are some of the causes of the criminalistic behavior that we're seeing, we communicate what we've identified, not necessarily the specifics, but what are some potential risk factors that we've identified in this person, and what are some potential remedies for those risk factors that we might be able to put in place to better address not only the inmate's criminalistic behavior, but that person's socioeconomic deficiencies or behavioral health deficiencies or risk factors that we've identified, and make the person a better member of society. If we can address that, the goal is that we can, or the hypothesis is that we can actually reduce crime, and we have. So that all occurs at that initial appearance.
You also check for their citizenship, is that correct?
Yes, every single person that comes into custody at the Yavapai County Sheriff's Office gets checked for citizenship. Anybody that we have any kind of inclination that they might not be a U.S. citizen, we work directly with ICE. We do screenings for those folks. We communicate to ICE what we've identified. ICE then will look at those individuals on a case-by-case basis, and ICE will make a determination if they're here illegally or not. And if they are here illegally, then they'll put a detainer on them, and we will, once they've adjudicated their case here, we will turn them over to ICE, and ICE will take them and do what they do.
So everybody is checked for their citizenship status. If it appears that they are not here legally, then ICE is called. And then once that happens, it's in ICE's hands and ICE's decision.
Correct.
So if ICE says we don't think they're legal, but we don't want to detain them for whatever reason, you don't detain them.
Absolutely not. We have no authority to. Immigration is a federal issue, and the federal authority that is put in charge of immigration and naturalization, deportation, when we do work directly with them, but when they say we're not doing that, then we have no legal authority to hold them.
I think that's something that people are confused about, because a lot of people will say if they're here in our country illegally, they've broken the law, and so therefore they should be deported. But it's not that easy of a determination.
No, not at all. I don't necessarily envy the ICE guys and the job that they have to do. Now, that being said, I 100% agree with our immigration laws, and they need to be enforced. But no, it's not an easy job, and the determinations that have to be made before we say, okay, you're out, those have to be done correctly. Otherwise, we're violating people's civil rights.
You also check, besides their citizen status, I'm sure you check to see if there's any other warrants out for them, if there's any other charges that are pending against them from other states, from the federal government, from anywhere else. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Every single person that comes into custody has a once and warrants check. Anybody we find with warrants out of other counties or other states, we notify those counties and those states, and then it's on those counties and those states to determine, yes, we're going to come and pick this guy up, or no, we're not. If they're not, then we let them out.
Have you found that it's easier to track that sort of thing down as technology has gotten more advanced? You know, like 20 years ago, wouldn't it have been harder to find out if people had warrants in other jurisdictions?
Absolutely. As technology continues to advance, it does become easier to, number one, identify people, and number two, communicate effectively with other entities. So yes, it has gotten easier to be able to say this person is wanted in another place and identify that.
Okay, so they're there. What the average inmate or a general inmate, I assume you get more men than women, is that correct?
Yes, women represent, I think, about 20% of our inmate population.
And obviously when they come in, you can't house a male inmate with a female inmate.
No.
There are laws about that.
Well, yeah, and we wind up with little inmates, and we don't want that. So.
Yeah. So, but there's also other reasons you might not be able to put a certain inmate in with somebody else. Is that correct?
Yes, and that's what I referred to as one of the first things that's done when they're booked in is we do a classification screening. And we can't house a member of an Aryan Brotherhood with a person of color. It just doesn't work, because every single person that is in our custody, we're responsible for. Our duty is to make sure that they are processing through the criminal justice system safely and effectively. We have to protect them while they're in our custody. If we don't, that becomes a liability for the county. So we have to take the person and who they are, all of who they are, into account before we house them with somebody else. We do that not only for their own protection, but for the officers' protection as well. It doesn't make any sense for us to put an entire dorm of MS-13 people together, because now we basically just let them have their gang within the prison or the jail. I shouldn't have said prison, because we do not have a prison up here, and that's another misconception about what this criminal justice complex is it's not a prison. So
As a matter of fact, you don't have anybody in your jail that has been sentenced to anything longer than a year, correct?
No, upon sentence, they stay in our jail for a short time until they're transferred to prison. There's paperwork, sentence orders, and all that kind of stuff that has to be processed through the correct processes before the person can actually go to prison. So there is about a week to 2 week period that somebody that is sentenced to a prison term is in the county jail prior to being transferred to prison. But they are transferred to prison. We do prison runs weekly.
And you don't do, but I mean, if somebody is sentenced to, say, a 2-year sentence for whatever, they will not spend those 2 years in your facility.
Absolutely not. In fact, anybody sentenced to prison, for instance, a felony DUI will go to prison, and if they're convicted, then generally it'd be like a 4-month prison term. Oftentimes, that 4 months is served before they even make it to prison, but they still have to be transferred to prison to get their number and what they call kill their number.
Mm-hmm.
So even those short period of sentences to prison, they end up still going to prison. So it is the law that there is not anybody that can be sentenced to jail time for longer than a year. So and there's not very many jail sentences out there that end up getting sentenced for any period of time that is great like that at all. In fact, we do these numbers constantly. Our average length of stay for misdemeanors, I think, is 3 days. Our average length of stay for felons, I think, is 25 or 27 days. I'd have to look at the numbers again, but our average length of stay is not really that great. People are processing through this system fairly rapidly.
And most people that are in that facility, what's the mix between felonies and misdemeanors?
5 to 6% of our population right now is a misdemeanor, meaning they have nothing other than a misdemeanor charge. And like I said, that average length of stay for that group of people, I think, is 3 days. The felon population is 94 to 95%. That means that they have at least one felony charge, if not multiple felony charges. And most of the time, they'll have multiple charges. And sometimes those charges are mixed as well. It's where they have felonies and misdemeanor charges. So,
do you think, just from your perspective, that the majority of the inmates are overcharged?
No. Every single DUI out there will basically be charged with every level of DUI they might commit. So if I was a 2.0, I'd have a DUI to the slightest, a DUI greater than 0.08, a DUI greater than 0.15. I'd have all these different charges. But each of those offenses are an offense in themselves. So if, for instance, if I took out a gun and I shot somebody, then I would have a charge of reckless discharge of a firearm. I'd have a charge of murder. I'd have all these different charges because the act of having the firearm and the endangerment that I caused by pointing that firearm at somebody, they're offenses within themselves. And I think that if we're going to enforce the law, we should enforce the law in its entirety.
And if the judge feels that the charge is unreasonable, the judge can throw it out. Correct?
Absolutely. As can the county attorney. Ultimately, the county attorney is the charging entity. So they're going to make the determination of what charges can we make stick, what charges are reasonable in whatever this offense was, and then the judge could also say, no, we're not going to do that. And further than that, if they go to trial, the jury will make a determination of every single count or of every single charge that they were charged with on whether they're guilty of it or not. So those charges might not necessarily all be a conviction, but
So I hadn't thought about it before, but when they first come to the jail, the charging usually is being done by the police officer.
correct.
And then later on, the county attorney's office reviews those charges, I would assume.
Yes.
And when do they get their phone call to their attorney?
So they have access to phone basically immediately once they're in the jail. We have a system where we enroll them in the phone system, and then they have speed dial numbers to our public defender's office, and every single inmate that is in our jail has phones within the dorm that they can use. And if they're calling the public defender's office, who has speed dial numbers set up, those are free calls. At intake, if they have a private attorney that they've already retained, oftentimes we'll let them use our phone to call them and not have them use the inmate phone. But they all have access to phones basically between 7 in the morning and 10 at night.
Okay, so I've heard some comments about the food. You're not serving gourmet food, I take it?
Well, if you compare our food service in the Yavapai County Jail to any other jail in Arizona, and I'd say most of the country, I think that you'd be surprised at how good it is and how well prepared it is and how cheap we do it for. Yavapai County does its own food service. We don't contract that service out to another agency or entity, which a lot of people do. We serve over 50,000 meals a month, and we do it. I think the cost of food is just under $1 per meal, and we do it in a manner that has earned us the health department. They come and they inspect us, and we have A+ ratings with the health department. In fact, just this last year, our kitchen manager and our kitchen staff earned the Golden Plate Award. The Golden Plate Award is what restaurants compete for, and to be a jail entity and to be able to serve food in an effective and efficient manner at $1 or less per meal and still earn your Golden Plate Award, I think that it's pretty impressive. So, in fact, and don't take it from me, because I've eaten the meals at the jail, and I do think they're pretty good. But the inmates that we get up here, they go, man, we couldn't wait to get to Yavapai. We couldn't wait to get out of the DOC and get back up to Yavapai where we can get a good meal, or what they're serving us down in Maricopa. Man, we couldn't wait to get back to Yavapai. So as far in terms of food goes, we do a phenomenal job at our food service. Okay. Now, the big controversy is building the new Criminal Justice Center here in the Prescott area. But where the old Prescott Jail is right downtown. Right downtown. You're kind of kitty corner from a school. Yep. It's still a preschool. Mm-hmm. In fact, you're kitty corner on both sides, from a preschool and a Christian school, the Christian Academy of Prescott right there. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then behind you is a residential area of not very cheap homes. No. Those are nice, they're historic homes. They've been restored. And so where you're talking about moving the Criminal Justice Center over to, it is, there aren't any homes within, a quarter of a mile? Would that be about right? I would say probably at least a quarter of a mile there. I know there's a ranch right over the hill, the Sundog Ranch right over there. Other than that, the Cliff Rose and Prescott Lakes up on the top of the hill across the highway are the closest homes. or Yavapai Hills on the top of the other hill on the other side.
So in Camp Verde, what's your average number of inmates that you have at a time?
So pre-COVID, and I've been saying pre-COVID because while COVID has been going on, the criminal justice system is kind of come to a standstill. We've had to do some things within the jail to make sure we're not taking in people that are potentially going to infect others. But anyway, pre-COVID, 524 people per day is our average daily population. The Camp Verde jail has 644 beds in it. But you hear those two numbers and you go, well, they're not overfull. But we talked about classification. And with classification, you can never reach 100% capacity in a jail or a prison because you cannot house those different demographics together. So industry standards reduces your total bed capacity by about 15 to 20%. So when you take that 15 to 20% off of your bed capacity, you end up with a 515 operational capacity of your jail. So with an average daily population of 524, we're over capacity. We have people on the floor. And I'm not technically right on the floor because one of the things identified in the late 90s when the feds came and complained and threatened to take us over in the Prescott jail was there was inmates on the floor. So one of the standards that we had to implement was we had to keep them, I think it's 12 inches off the ground. So we have these plastic beds. The inmates call them boats because they never sleep on them right. Even though they're meant to keep them 12 inches off the ground, they flip them over and sleep inside of them. They've even been caught bobsledding down the stairs in them. So so our capacity, we've outgrown our capacity. When COVID, when we start doing business as normal and we start processing this backlog of cases that have been going on, because people are still being charged with crimes, even though they may not be going to jail. They're eventually going to be going to jail. Or the consequences for the actions of them being on probation and not following through with the things that they needed to be doing on probation, that immediate sanction or that punishment wasn't there because of COVID. So I'm really, really nervous about what our population looks like moving forward, because we're anticipating that we're going to be 650 just trying to catch up with the backlog of what COVID has done. And
the new facility will have 140, is that correct?
I think it's 140 beds is what they've designed it as this initial stage. And this criminal justice complex was planned, it started to be planned 20 years ago. And everybody refers to this as the first phase. Well, really the first phase was when juvenile detention was built. This was the plan for this complex to go in this location, to have juvenile and probation and county attorney's office and public defender's office and courts and all of these different things. So really this is the next step in what has already been started as the initial phase of the criminal justice complex. And this phase will have about 140 beds. One thing I do want to touch on real quick is that 524 average daily population, that is down from what we should be. Right now, based on trends and area growth and all that kind of stuff, we should be 650 people at this point. So the reason we're not at that 620, 650 average daily population is because of diversionary programs that we implemented starting back in 2014. In fact, maybe in pre that. We've really been looking at how we can better address what the causes of the criminalistic behavior is rather than just the criminalistic behavior. And this is our menu of diversionary efforts is vast, and it encompasses efforts from the county attorney to the public defender to probation, to the jail, to the courts, to the community providers in mental health and behavioral health issues, to our community providers in homelessness and shelter services, to different philanthropic and ministry-based services. We have really taken a community-based model and thrown just about everything we can at it. And we've seen some very positive efforts, or some very, very positive results, rather. We have reduced our recidivism rate from 38% down to 16%. We've reduced our bookings from over 10,000 a year to 8,000. That's a 20% reduction in 3 years. So we're at this 524 average daily population after we have done this extensive diversionary criminal justice reform look. It's much different now than it was 20 years ago when I started.
Do you enjoy your job more now, knowing that you're making an effort to get at the root of the problem rather than just treat them like, horrible people?
I find more reward in it, yes. Do I enjoy it? I can tell you that I work harder now as an administrator doing the work that I do than I ever have at the sheriff's office. And this is being a detention officer, working in a jail facility is no easy task. It's no easy task. We have a 25% turnover rate. Not everybody is suited to do this job, and it is a hard job. And I think that what we're doing now, especially this social service that's being done by a law enforcement agency, it's harder. It's more in depth, and oftentimes you have to have the right person do it. You have to have the buy-in for it, because oftentimes you have the law enforcement officers that go, wait, my job is to enforce the law, not to make people better. I'm not a social worker. I'm not but we ultimately, all law enforcement officers got into this position, or these jobs, because they want to give back. They want to give back to their communities. And this is another way to be able to give back to our communities, even though it's with the offenders. And I'll tell you, you get to be in law enforcement for a long time, especially you go out to dinner with some of these guys. Mm-hmm. They're on edge. They put their backs towards the wall, or they want to make sure that they're looking out for themselves, and they're checking their burger. Hey, does that look like spit to you? So the people that we work with in our jails, they're in our communities. They're our waiters and waitresses at the restaurants that we attend, or we frequent. They're the people checking us out at the grocery stores, or They live in and are amongst us all the time. We do business with them because they're business owners. And it's doing the job that I do now, and being in the community like I'm in the community now, I can't tell you how many times or letters that I get from people that have gone through some of these diversionary programs and the things that we do, and the appreciation that they have. Or from their families that says, man, my son or daughter was on a path that was it was leading them to their grave. And now they're doing this, they're doing this well. I was at a local sober living home recently, and I was talking to the person in charge of that home. And in his office was a person that had exited the jail, was a graduate of our moral recognition therapy. Recognition is a made-up word, but that's right. Mm-hmm. A graduate of that program, and he's sitting in that house manager's office, and he's like, "Oh, Mr. Silvernale, it's so good to see you, and I'm doing so well." And so the reward that I get out of seeing people be active, productive members of society just confirms that we're doing something right.
So what else would you like the public to know, either about what you do for your job or about the upcoming Criminal Justice Center and why you think that it's needed? What if you could get the entire community to understand one fact, what would that one fact be?
Oh my gosh. I don't know that I could limit it to just one fact, because there are so many of them. If I were to communicate just the one fact of why this criminal justice complex is needed, is because we have to continue what we're doing, and we have to continue it better. We have to build upon it. And we're already out of space where we're at. And in order to build upon what we're doing now, so that we can reduce the number of people that are going to jails and prisons in our state, we have to do it more effectively and efficiently. Location plays a huge part in the effectiveness and efficiency of the criminal justice system. That would be the one thing, but there are tons of other things that I would say this is why it's needed. So I know I talked to you about this a couple days ago, but I love our downtown courthouse. That downtown courthouse is historic and it's beautiful, but it is one of the most dangerous things that we do as a law enforcement officer, is take people to that courthouse. In a modern day courthouse, the only place where the inmate, the family, the court staff, the judge, the attorneys, the only place that those people would come together is in the courtroom. In our courthouse downtown Prescott here, the same corridors are being used by all of those people, the same elevators. We're moving on a Monday or Tuesday, generally moving 60 to 80 people through that courthouse. And it's a challenge. And it puts our officers at risk. It puts the inmates at risk. It puts the court staff and the people that are down there at risk. So we need to be able to do our criminal justice practices more efficiently. And our downtown Prescott courthouse, how even in all its beauty and all its historicness, is not the way to do it.
Some people have suggested you should just remodel the downtown jail facility and fix it up.
Mm-hmm.
When I read the Chin report, they said pretty much anything rated over a .60 was, absolutely major renovations, or it should be torn down and started over.
Mm-hmm.
That facility was rated between 84, I believe, and 92. Something like that. So .90 or .84, .82, something in that range. And even if you spent the money on that, you would not have the space, would you, to do the mental health piece and the other pieces that you're doing that have been so successful.
Yeah. So in 2000, I can't remember if that was a 14 or 16 report, but it was estimated that it would be around $12 or $13 million to renovate the Prescott facility. That number has gone up today. I mean, it was estimated that this new criminal justice complex would be somewhere in the neighborhood, I think 38 or 40 million. Obviously, it's gone up today. So if we were to do that, and if you've never been in the Prescott jail, I worked there for the first, I worked there through 2009 before we closed it, and then even after 2009. It is antiquated. It is a lineal design, which isn't used anymore in jail construction. It is staff intensive to operate. And to bring it up to par, we would lose capacity in that jail. Right now, that jail has 133 beds. And if we were to bring that jail up to standards, we would, I'll bet you, lose at least 25 to 30% of those beds. So that brings us down to about 100 beds. And then when you take into consideration classification, you end up at somewhere at around probably a 75 bed operational capacity. And what you haven't gained is you haven't gained any courtrooms. You haven't gained any ability to co-locate with our community providers to be able to divert people directly into outside care. You haven't gained any of the efficiencies in movement that has to take place in court. And you keep the safety issues and concerns in place by operating within our downtown courthouse. So really, and I think Craig Brown said it best, is that by doing that, you're really throwing good money after bad. And it doesn't make sense to do. You don't increase any of your efficiencies. And really, when you increase efficiency, that's when you'll save money over time.
So it sounds like then most of the criminal courtroom proceedings would take place then in the new Criminal Justice Center, and then that would free up the downtown court for more like civil matters and that sort of thing. Is that correct?
Most of the day-to-day courtroom appearances would happen out there at that facility. I anticipate that there'd probably be some trials that could still take place in the downtown courthouse or some of the other outlying courthouses. I mean, there's 26 courts in Yavapai County. So there's all kinds of courts that we have to end up going to. There's going to be in-person appearances out in Prescott Valley or Seligman every once in a while, but the majority of court hearings would take place in that facility.
Okay. So back to that one question. What are the main things? I'll give you more than one fact.
Sure.
What are the main things you really want people to know and to understand about the importance of even having a jail in Yavapai County, what the law is around that, and kind of just sum everything up?
So the sheriff is mandated by statute to operate a jail. He has no choice. We don't, as a county, get to say, well, we're just not going to do that part of what statute dictates. So the sheriff not only has to operate a jail, but he has to operate it to standards. And we are operating that jail within those standards, and I think we do a pretty good job. Because the models that we implement in diversion and other things, our RTC program, it's being looked at and replicated throughout our state and throughout our nation. So I would want the public to know that we don't have a choice but to do it. And we do it well. And if we didn't do it well, then we'll be writing bigger checks, either because the federal government comes in and says, we're going to make you do this, and we're writing the checks and you're paying the bill, or because we get sued. I like Sheriff Joe when Sheriff Joe was in office, and I heard he was running again, which is pretty crazy. But Sheriff Joe spent more money in lawsuits every year than our entire jail budget. So it's not being fiscally responsible. It's almost cheaper it is cheaper to just do it right instead of trying to do it hard, if that makes sense, right? So I think that he has a lot of good points, and yeah, inmates are there for a reason, and there should be a lesson to be learned, and they should be coming out of there knowing that, hey, I shouldn't commit any more crimes. But is there a different way to do it? And I think there is, and I think that we're doing that. And I just lost my train of thought. But the importance of continuing to do this well, so that we don't put ourselves in a position where we're being sued. So we don't put ourselves in a position where the federal government is coming in again and saying, guess what? now you're gonna do this, and we're gonna write the checks, and you're gonna pay the bill. We need to stay on top of this. We need to ensure that we're growing our infrastructure with our community's growth. And it's not just in jails, that's our infrastructure as a whole. I would also want the members of the public to know that we elect people to make these decisions for us. You don't put on the ballot every capital improvement project that you ever want to do. I can't remember a time when I was asked if we wanted a new, building for our ITS department, or if we wanted a new structure for the town of Prescott Valley, or the people we put in office make those decisions. The people we put in office have jobs that they're statutorily obligated to do. And when the people we put in office say that this is what I need to do my job, I think we need to listen to them. So, and this isn't just some crazy sheriff, which, by the way, Sheriff Masher, I don't think you're crazy. He's still my boss. So
Yes.
This is the last 3 sheriffs we've had that said we need this. This is the position of the next sheriff we're going to have that says we need this. This is the position of our criminal justice practitioners in Yavapai County that says we need this. So we were never asked if we wanted a jail or not. And rightfully so. I don't think we should have been, because we put people in place to say whether or not what we need in those different areas. So one of the biggest misconceptions that I hear on this campaign trail, and this topic has been brought up, and it's almost made this campaign a one-issue campaign, and is that we said no twice. No, we didn't say no twice. I went to the ballot in both 2008 and 2014, and I remember what the ballot says, and I have the ballot nomenclature. I carry it around with me because I want to prove to people that, listen, we weren't asked if we wanted a jail or not. That's not our decision. That's our sheriff's decision. That's our criminal justice system's decision. That's the people we put in office, their decision. And we need to support the people. In fact, now more than ever, we need to support our law enforcement. And we were asked, here's how you get to pay for it. This is what we need. This is the need of the community. You put me in office to supply the needs of the community. And this is how we need to do it. And you have a choice. Do you want to pay for it this way, or do you want to pay for it that way? And the only reason you had a choice is because we have a jail district. And a jail district is a good thing because we pay for the needs of the jail through everybody's contribution, even the people that are coming out of jail and going across the street and buying their cigarettes. They're contributing to that jail. Whenever we need other needs, when they built the Civic Center down there in Prescott Valley, they didn't come to you on your ballot with an option saying, well, do you want it or not? They didn't come to you saying, hey, we're going to build it, and how do you want to pay for it? We were given an opportunity that I think that as a community we squandered, and I think that the people need to know that we didn't say no twice. It was never asked of us, and the only thing that was asked was how we want to pay for it. And this is a valid, legitimate, needed law enforcement service. And again, I think now more than ever, supporting our law enforcement is very important.
Okay, so there are 2 candidates running for county attorney.
Mm-hmm.
Sheila Polk's the incumbent, David Stringer is the challenger.
Yes.
And when David Stringer was down in the legislature, he proposed some laws that he felt would reduce jail populations. One of those series of laws would have been to raise the threshold of drug possession to levels which I know you've seen.
Mm-hmm.
It would include up to 5 pounds of marijuana, up to 5 milligrams of fentanyl, 100 doses of LSD, 10 grams of heroin. does that really, if that were law, does that really keep people out of jail? Or do you think that would create more crime that would end up ultimately putting more people in jail?
I think that it would have the potential of creating more crime. I think that you almost start to loosen up that belt on what's acceptable, and people are going to push those limits everywhere they can. I mean, they already do. So I think that if we raise that threshold, then really all we're doing is saying that, well, now this is how much you can carry. That's not considered sales, or I don't think it does anything good for the drug problem at all. I think that the legislators, they recognize that, and that's why none of them passed.
Some of them didn't even get a hearing.
Yeah.
Would you also be concerned about more people dying of overdoses with those levels?
Yes, I think that if it were to be acceptable to have those levels in your possession, then I think that more people would access what their right would be. And absolutely, I think that we'd see overdoses going up. I mean, the drug problem across the country is huge, and the things that are going on with some of these drug things, and the stories that I read from some of these folks that are involved in drugs, some of the folks that we help divert are really truly sad, and I think that we would do nothing but a disservice to those folks by saying, hey, it's okay.
And another series of laws that he proposed had to do with allowing more earned time off or earned credit for time served.
Credit
I
for
guess.
time served, yeah.
Yeah, so that in some cases, very violent crimes or children, sexual crimes against children, that would be every 3 days served, you would get a day credit. Right now it's 6 days, I think. And for other crimes, it would be every 1 day served, you'd get a day of credit, which would effectively cut the sentence in half so long as there's good behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Again, do you think that's does that really help reduce the jail population?
I think initially it would reduce, not jail populations, because really, sentenced people in jail and credit for time served in jail is already happening. But in our prison populations, I think that it would initially reduce it, but I think that what you'll find is that the victims of these crimes would be outraged. And I think that what you'll find is that the sentences would go up to counteract what David would be proposing in that. Even in cases where somebody were to get a maximum sentence, I think that you could see that there would be people pushing for us to raise maximum sentence ranges even higher than they are now. So I don't think that it would be effective. And again, I think that that's why it didn't go anywhere.
Okay, I think we've covered everything and more pretty much, unless there's something else you want to add. Thank you so much for sitting down with me.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Any final words?
Well, we've got a couple days left before the election, so if you haven't already cast your ballot, I, number one, encourage you to go do so. That's how we let our voices be heard, as we put the people in office that we think are going to best represent us. I hope that that's me if I'm in your district. If you haven't done your research, if you haven't done your vote yet, check me out at www.electbriansilvernale.com. You can get me on Facebook. My contact information is everywhere. I have been in this community a long time, and I'm very approachable, and I answer all my own questions. So even if it's not about my candidacy as a board of supervisor, if you want to know anything else from me about my roles at the sheriff's office or the things that we do, I'm happy to engage with you.
that is one thing we should touch on really quickly, and that is why you decided to try to trade your current position for being a supervisor.
Yeah, my wife has asked me that question a lot because this literally is a pay cut from what I make now if I'm elected to the board. But I talked about it when I introduced myself at the beginning of this, and I've always had a servant's heart. I've always had a desire to give back. And that's what landed me at the sheriff's office. My role at the sheriff's office has really been to improve efficiencies within our operation to save money. My role at the sheriff's office has led me to be in contact with most all of our department heads within Yavapai County and really know what Yavapai County does and the businesses that we, or the business that Yavapai County does. So I think that my ability to bring cost-saving efficiencies to the sheriff's office is best played out in the county as a whole to bring cost-saving efficiencies in all of our different departments. I think that we do a pretty good job in Yavapai County. I've been here a long time. We're a fiscally conservative county. We do a pretty decent job at managing the money. But I think that there's some things that we can do better. And I think had it not been for my role at the sheriff's office and being able to firsthand see some of these things that I think we can do better at, then I might not have chosen to make this run for office. But secondly, I am a Christian. Before I make any decision, I really research it. Not only myself, but I take it to God and I pray about it. And I 100% wholeheartedly believe that God is leading me to do this. I think because of my experience at the sheriff's office and what I can bring to the county. That's why I'm doing it.
Well, I think that the voice that you have added to the campaign has been very valuable and very strong. The voters have some decisions to make, obviously, but I want to thank you. I'm not in your district, but I do want to thank you for all of your efforts and for your willingness to help explain some of these things that people could be confused about. So.
Thank you, Lynn. I appreciate you and what you do for our communities as well.
Okay, thanks. Bye.